Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today, we're headed back in time to June 18th, 1864, where Union forces in Virginia are preparing for a major assault during the early part of the Petersburg campaign. During the wee hours of that day, Major General George G. Meade, the irascible commander of the Army of the Potomac, passed by the tent of his aide, Colonel Theodore Lyman, the man pictured here, and he called out, "Lyman, you're behind time." Lyman stepped out fully dressed, curtly replying, "No, sir, I am ready." Most everyone, in fact, felt tense, quite tense, on this day of battle. Meade sent Lyman and a few orderlies to the headquarters of Major General Gouverneur K. Warren, whose Fifth Corps would lead the attack, and from where Lyman would relay reports via telegraph to Meade. Lyman arrived around 4:30 a.m. to find Warren catching a brief rest under a tree near a pair of tents marked with the headquarters flag. Orders soon came to advance and attack the enemy. However, a series of difficulties to get Warren's divisions in position delayed the attack until later that afternoon, hours after it was planned to go into effect. A book of Lyman's letters, published in 1922, a quarter century after his death, under the title Meade's Headquarters, 1863 to 1865, Letters of Colonel Theodore Lyman from the Wilderness to Appomattox, tells the story of watching the assault, which failed, the flag of truce he carried to gather up the dead, and what it was like to cross the enemy picket line, meet with an enemy officer, and the conversation they had. I want to read it to you. Let's begin with the end of the letter Lyman wrote on June 18th, and then his June 19th letter in full. So here we go. At 3:30 in the afternoon, the first assault took place. We rode on an open field to watch it. In front was a broad expanse, quite flat, then the railroad cut with a fringe of bushes, and then a gradual rise crowned by rebel rifle pits and batteries, which were distant, perhaps a half a mile. Close to us on either side were our batteries firing as fast as they could, and the rebels were sending back shot, shell, and shrapnel as hard as possible. Half a mile is no good with mini rifles, and as soon as we attacked, the balls came tolerably numerous, cutting up little puffs of sand on the dry field. I sat up straight on my horse, but I can't say it was pleasant, though it is a help to have others cool and brave. It was, as I expected, 45 days of constant marching up to that point, assaulting and trenching our poor preparation for a rush. The men went in, but not without spirit. Received by a withering fire, they sullenly fell back a few paces to a slight crest and lay down, as much as to say, "We can't assault, but we won't run." The slopes, covered with dead and wounded, bore testimony that they were willing to give proof of courage, even in circumstances that they deemed desperate. Another attack at 6 resulted no better, save that the lines were at all points pressed close in on those of the enemy. General Birney, during the day, made a grand attack with no better success on the right. I returned after dark, feeling pretty sad. General Meade was much disappointed, but took it cheerfully, as he does every matter which affects him personally. The whole thing resulted just as I expected. You cannot strike a full blow with a wounded hand. That's the end of his June 18th letter. Now, the June 19th letter. It have being represented to General Meade that there were some wounded and a good many dead between the lines, he determined to send a flag to get a short armistice, as at Cold Harbor. I was again selected as the man having good clothes to undertake the mission. This time I determined to have a bugler, and so I did, and very spruce he was with a German silver key bugle. Likewise, there was a tall sergeant in Sunday best with General Seth Williams's new damask tablecloth on an appropriate staff. Thus equipped and furnished with a large letter, I rode forth. We crossed the rail near Colonel Avery's, rode into the woods, and immediately came on the picket reserves of cavalry, where we got a man to guide us to the extreme left of the infantry picket line. We floundered through a little swampy run, brushed through some brush, and came on a little clearing, at the other side of which was a gentleman with a cocked musket eyeing us suspiciously, but who withdrew on seeing our color. Then we came on what is always a pretty sight, a picket line in a wood. The men are dotted along 10 or 15 feet apart, with stronger parties on the roads, and you see them indistinctly as they stand, half hidden among the trees and bushes. I found there Captain Thatcher in command of the picket line. There was some delay here in sending word to the division commander and to a battery that was firing. As soon as they were notified, Captain Thatcher and myself, with the flag about 5 paces ahead and the bugler behind, walked along a wood road. Thatcher is a brisk, black eyed little man and kept peeping about through the dense pines and saying, "We're getting somewhere pretty near them. Wave your flag, Sergeant." As for myself, I looked with some confidence for a salutation of 2 or 3 bullets, but made no observation as being superfluous under the circumstances. Presently, the flag bearer, who, you may be sure, kept an extremely bright lookout, said, "There's one of 'em," and immediately waved the emblem of peace in a truly conscientious manner. I looked and saw the main road, and, in an open field beyond, stood a single grayback, looking dubiously at us with his rifle ready for any emergency. I told the bugler to blow a parley, which he did in very good style, and while I advanced to call to the solitary sentry, but the effect of the bugle was most marvelous. Quite as often he whistled shrill, and he was answered from the hill. In an instant, a line of some 75 men rose as if out of the ground. It was their pickets, who had been concealed in little holes dug in the slope of the gentle hill. One of them laid down his musket and came forward when I asked for an officer, whereat he touched his hat, probably awestruck by my cotton gloves, and returned to fetch one. Then came a red faced captain who received my dispatch and a bundle of letters from rebel prisoners and promised as speedy answers. So the flag was stuck up on a fence and we waited. In a few minutes, the commander of the pickets hastened out to do me honor, a Major Crow of Alabama, a remarkably bright, nice looking man. We exchanged compliments in newspapers, and he entertained me with an amusing account how he had gone on leave to North Alabama and how our cavalry suddenly rushed into town, whereupon he ascended briskly into the belfry of the courthouse, through the slats of which he beheld a large number of his friends gobbled up and marched off, while he himself nearly froze to death with extreme cold. By this time, we had a variety of a visitor on horseback, a Colonel Ring, a handsome man who was curious about the Negro troops and said, with an honesty unmistakable, that he would not be a bit afraid to fight them 1 against 2. They, however, said nothing at all unpleasant or rude. The next comer was apparently a staff officer, a young man of rather a sour countenance with a large pair of spurs. He brought a message that we should immediately retire from the lines and hostilities would then recommence till the answer was ready, when they would put a white flag on their rifle pit. This amused me, for I had already seen all that could be seen and knew just where their position was just at that point. I returned whence I came and waited at a wretched, deserted house. At 7 in the evening, I got the reply and carried it in. But some of it was, "Have the honor to acknowledge your favor. As to your proposition, I don't see it." And so there was no armistice. Our poor wounded fellows, I believe, we got off that night, all of them, or all but a very few, and thus ended my second diplomatic mission. Since then, General Williams has caused a regular white flag to be made ready for use in the future. So there you have the story of Captain Theodore Lyman of the staff of General George G. Meade after a brutal failed attack in front of Petersburg on June 18th, 1864, and his efforts, the next day, failed efforts to arrange a truce, his second effort to be able to do so during the Overland Campaign. So thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of A Life on the Civil War Research Trail.